There are moments in life when you discover that everything you thought you knew about your own story was just the surface. Moments when you realize that the struggles you faced, the small miracles that got you through the hardest times, and even the people who seemed to appear out of nowhere to help you weren't coincidences at all. What I'm about to share with you is one of those stories that will make you believe in guardian angels, hidden connections, and the incredible power of good deeds that echo through decades. If you've ever been treated like you don't matter because of how you look, because of where you come from, or because you don't have the right clothes or the right address, this story is going to shake you to your core. If you've ever wondered whether the kind things you do when nobody's watching actually make a difference, if you've ever questioned whether love really can overcome prejudice and class barriers, then what happened to me and my husband Robert is going to restore your faith in humanity. This is a story about a night that started with the worst phone call of my life and ended with discovering a family secret that had been protecting us for 30 years. It's about being humiliated and thrown out of a hospital while my husband was dying, only to learn that the man who heard my cries for help wasn't just any stranger. He was someone whose life Robert had saved decades ago, someone who had been watching over us like a guardian angel ever since. Hit that like button right now if you believe that love transcends class barriers, if you believe that heroes don't always wear capes, and if you believe that every act of kindness creates ripples that can last a lifetime. And if you want to hear more incredible stories about family secrets, hidden connections, and justice that comes when you least expect it, subscribe to this channel, because I promise you, these stories will remind you that we're all more connected than we think. What I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about luck, coincidence, and the invisible forces that sometimes guide our lives. It's about discovering that the man I'd been married to for 45 years was a hero I never knew about, and that sometimes the people who save us are the same people we end up saving in return. This story will make you look at every maintenance worker, every janitor, every person in work clothes differently, because you never know who might be the angel in disguise. My name is Margaret Thompson, and for 45 years I thought I knew everything there was to know about my husband Robert. We met when we were both 23, got married 6 months later, and built a simple but beautiful life together in the same little house we bought as newlyweds. Robert worked maintenance and building supervision at various office buildings downtown, while I spent 30 years as a school janitor before retiring. We never had much money, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. Robert was the kind of man who fixed neighbors' leaky faucets without being asked, who shoveled elderly Mrs. Garcia's driveway every winter, who always carried cash to give to homeless veterans downtown. He had these strong, calloused hands that could repair anything, and the gentlest heart I'd ever known. We lived paycheck to paycheck most of our lives, but somehow, we always seemed to get by. When unexpected bills came up, Robert would somehow pick up extra work, or we'd get a small bonus from his company that would cover exactly what we needed. Looking back now, I realize there were signs that our life wasn't as ordinary as it seemed. Robert's supervisors always spoke about him with unusual respect, almost reverence. His company Christmas bonuses were always a little more generous than what other maintenance workers received. When he had that back injury 5 years ago, his health insurance covered everything without question, even though I remembered worrying we couldn't afford the treatment. But Robert would just shrug and say we were lucky, that his company took good care of their long-term employees. That Tuesday night started like any other. Robert had worked late at the Whitmore Industries building downtown. Something about checking the heating system before a big board meeting the next day. I was already in my nightgown, watching the evening news, and waiting for him to come home so we could share a cup of tea like we did every night. We were planning to celebrate our 46th wedding anniversary the following weekend. Maybe splurge on dinner at that Italian restaurant we'd been talking about for months. Then the phone rang at 11:30, and my entire world shattered. The voice on the other end was calm and professional. but the words hit me like physical blows. Massive heart attack. St. Catherine's Medical Center. Critical condition. You need to come immediately. I threw on the first clothes I could find, my old house dress and bedroom slippers, and raced into the night in our neighbor's borrowed car, praying to God I wouldn't lose the only man I'd ever loved. Driving through those empty streets at midnight, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I kept telling myself that Robert was strong, that he would pull through this. He had to. We'd never spent a single night apart in 45 years of marriage, and I wasn't about to start now. St. Catherine's Medical Center loomed ahead like a fortress of glass and steel, the most expensive private hospital in the city. I'd driven past it countless times, but never imagined I'd need to go inside. The moment I rushed through those polished doors, in my house dress and slippers, I felt every eye in that pristine lobby turn toward me. The night receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup and a perfectly pressed uniform, looked me up and down like I was something that had wandered in from the street. When I gasped out that my husband, Robert Thompson, had been brought in with a heart attack, she frowned at her computer screen with obvious skepticism. "I'm sorry, but I don't see any Robert Thompson in our system," she said coolly, as if I might be confused about my own husband's name. My heart stopped. Had they taken him somewhere else? Was I too late? I pulled out Robert's work ID with trembling hands, explaining through tears that the ambulance had definitely brought him here. She typed again, slowly, like she was doing me an enormous favor. "Oh," she said finally, her eyebrows raising in surprise. "There is a Mr. Thompson, but he's registered on our VIP floor. Are you sure you have the right patient?" VIP floor. Nothing about this made sense. Robert was a maintenance worker. We didn't have the kind of insurance that put you on VIP floors. But I didn't care about the confusion. I just needed to see my husband. The elevator ride to the penthouse level felt like ascending into another world. When those doors opened, I stepped into what looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings on the walls, and nurses who moved like they were serving royalty rather than caring for patients. I felt completely out of place in my nightgown and slippers, but I pushed forward, desperate to find Robert's room. That's when I met Patricia, the head nurse, whose cold eyes swept over my appearance with undisguised disdain. "Excuse me," she said, in a voice that could freeze water, "but this floor maintains certain standards. I'm going to need to see some identification and verify that you belong here." Patricia's tone made it clear that she'd already decided I didn't belong on her precious VIP floor. When I explained through tears that Robert Thompson was my husband and that he was dying, she looked at me like I was either lying or delusional. "Mrs. Thompson, is it?" she said, with barely concealed contempt. "I find it very difficult to believe that someone in your condition would have a husband receiving care on this floor. My condition." The words hit me like a slap. I was wearing a house dress and slippers because I'd received a middle-of-the-night call that my husband was dying. I looked exactly like what I was, a terrified wife who had rushed to the hospital without thinking about anything except getting to the man she loved. But to Patricia, I looked like someone who didn't belong in her world of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. "Please," I begged, my voice breaking. "He's had a massive heart attack. The doctors said I needed to come immediately. I just need to see him." But Patricia was already signaling to security. Two large men in crisp uniforms who approached me like I was some kind of threat. The other wealthy families on the floor, dressed in their expensive clothes, even at this hour, turned to stare at the spectacle I was apparently creating. "Ma'am, you're going to need to leave," one of the security guards said firmly. "You're disturbing other patients and families." Disturbing them? I was a wife, trying to see her dying husband. But as they took my arms to escort me out, I caught a glimpse of an elderly man in an expensive silk robe, standing in a doorway down the hall. He was watching everything with an expression I couldn't quite read: shock, recognition, something that looked almost like guilt. As the elevator doors closed on Patricia's satisfied face, and the guards flanked me on either side, I heard the man in the robe say something urgent to the nurses. But it was too late. They were already taking me down, away from Robert, away from the chance to hold his hand one more time, to tell him I loved him, to say goodbye, if this really was the end. In the parking lot, sitting in that borrowed car, I sobbed until I had no tears left. 45 years of marriage, and I couldn't even be with him when he needed me most. I felt like I had failed him completely. Failed the man who had never failed me once in all our years together. I was still crying in that parking lot when I heard footsteps approaching. Through my tear-blurred vision, I saw the elderly man in the expensive robe walking toward me, but now he was dressed in an immaculate suit despite the late hour. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but his eyes held something I hadn't expected: genuine kindness and what looked like deep regret. "Mrs. Thompson," he said gently, and I was startled that he knew my name. "My name is Alexander Whitmore. I believe we need to talk." The name meant nothing to me, but something about his tone made me stop crying. He asked if I would come back inside with him, promising that I would be able to see Robert. I was so desperate and confused that I would have followed anyone who could get me to my husband's bedside. Walking back through that lobby with Alexander Whitmore was like traveling with royalty. Every staff member we passed practically bowed, and the same receptionist who had treated me like dirt now couldn't apologize enough for the misunderstanding. But I barely noticed their changed attitudes because my mind was spinning with questions. Who was this man, and why was he helping me? When we reached Robert's room, my heart nearly stopped. My husband was surrounded by machines and monitors, but he was breathing, and the doctors assured me he was stable. Alexander had moved him to this VIP suite and was covering all the medical expenses that I later learned totaled over $200,000. But why would a complete stranger do this for us? That's when Alexander told me something that changed everything I thought I knew about our life. "Mrs. Thompson," he said quietly, 30 years ago, your husband saved my life. I was trapped under debris during a construction accident at one of my buildings, and Robert risked everything to pull me out. When my lawyers tried to pay him to keep quiet about the safety violations that caused the accident, he refused to take a penny more than what he felt was fair compensation for his time off work. My legs nearly gave out. Robert had never told me about saving anyone's life. In all our years together, through all our conversations about his work, he had never once mentioned being a hero. But Alexander wasn't finished. With tears in his eyes, he explained that he had been watching over us ever since, secretly ensuring Robert always had steady work, quietly supplementing his salary, making sure we had health coverage when we needed it. Standing in that hospital room, watching my husband sleep peacefully while surrounded by the best medical care money could buy, I finally understood that our life had never been about luck or coincidence. For 30 years, we had been protected by an invisible guardian angel who never forgot the man who saved his life. Robert's gentle nature, his instinct to help anyone in need without expecting anything in return, had created a ripple effect that came back to save him when he needed it most. When Robert finally woke up 2 days later and saw Alexander sitting beside his bed, the look of shock on his face told me everything. He had genuinely forgotten about the heroic thing he'd done all those years ago. "I just helped someone who needed help," he said simply, the same way he talked about fixing Mrs. Garcia's leaky pipes or helping a stranded motorist change a tire. That's who Robert was. A man who did the right thing so naturally that he didn't even remember it as something special. Alexander didn't just pay for Robert's medical care. He paid off our mortgage, set up a fund to cover all our future healthcare needs, and established a scholarship in Robert's name for children of working-class families. But more than that, he gave us something we'd never had before: a chosen family. We now have regular dinners together, and Alexander treats us like the brother and sister he never had. The hospital implemented what they now call The Robert Thompson Protocol, ensuring that every patient's family is treated with dignity regardless of their appearance or social status. Patricia and those security guards lost their jobs, but the real victory was knowing that no other frightened spouse would be turned away during their darkest hour. Margaret and Robert's story proves that heroism isn't about headlines or recognition. It's about doing what's right when no one is watching. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that every act of kindness matters and that good deeds never truly disappear, smash that like button right now. Share this with someone who needs to remember that we're all more connected than we think, and that love really can triumph over prejudice and class barriers. Subscribe for more incredible true stories about hidden connections, guardian angels, and the amazing ways our past actions can save our future. Remember, you never know whose life you might be touching today, or who might be your secret protector tomorrow. Sometimes the most ordinary heroes create the most extraordinary miracles.